Okay, pretty quick video here, I think. We're just going to go over the LATAM roster moves really quickly. Let me say, if you're interested in watching LATAM in English, there isn't an official broadcast, but they are doing co-streamers. So these individuals will be doing co-streaming in Portuguese, but we have 4 English co-streamers, Milosh, Hap, Fresh, and Dez. Okay, here we are in super secret dark mode on the Brazil 2022 Stage 1 Liquipedia page. I did fib a little bit earlier. I said LATAM, I really just meant Brazil. We're not actually going to talk about the Mexico or the South American division. We are just going to talk about the main division, that is Brazil. Not to say that the other ones aren't important, but indeed Brazil is the big one within the LATAM region, the one that everybody thinks of. And yeah, this video might be a little bit late, but a lot of these roster announcements came really late. As I'm recording this, the games are currently ongoing. They finished at least one, so I mean, I guess a little bit of a spoiler warning at the end. We'll just see who beat whom, and I mean, it's not a whole lot of information, but if you care. Okay, so let's scroll down and take a look at the teams here. So right, we have 10 teams competing in the Brazil division: Black Dragons, FaZe, Ninjas in Pajamas, Liquid, INTZ, OO Nation, or Double O Nation, or 00 Nation, whatever, however they prefer it to be said, Furia, W7M, Team 1, and MIBR. Sort of similar to what NA did, 4 of the top teams from Brazil, not exactly the top 4, but it's a little bit hard to draw those lines for pretty much any region anymore. But anyways, 4 of the top teams did not make any changes, those being FaZe, Liquid, NIP, and MIBR. So we'll look at those rosters first. We'll start with FaZe. So they still have Astro, Cameraman, Bullet, Cyber, and Souls. I'm not going to go over any of the coaching staff or anything because I know very little about any of that. We're just going to be going over the playing rosters. NIP is Kamikaze, Psycho, Julio, Muzi, and Pino. Team Liquid is Nesk, Resets, Palu, PSK, and Ask. And then MIBR is Reduct, Falls, Lucid, Raps, and Philippox. And that means that we have 6 teams that made some sort of changes. So we'll start with Black Dragons, just a modest little change. They dropped Live and they picked up Nade. Live actually went to another team, so we'll see that in a minute. And so that leaves the roster at Patoxy, Ion, Perez, Baseto, and Nade. And then next up we have INTZ, Drunks, Vitz, Hornetau, Zach, and PPWS, with PPWS joining the roster and VNX being dropped from the roster. And then Team 1 has pretty well done a full restructuring. We've seen stuff like this happen in the past. It's kind of similar to what they did with the Sonics, where Super stayed on and then they rebuilt around him. It's Lagonis staying on here with 4 new players joining him. We have Dots, Dash, so this little Morse code duo. They're coming over from Supernova, the team that played in relegations but lost to Santos. And we'll talk about Santos in just a second. So anyways, the roster is Dots, Dash, RHZ, Maya, and Lagonis. So again, 4 new players, and then Lagonis remaining. The other 3 Team 1 players we'll also see in a moment. Alamau, if you're unaware, went over to EU. So he is still playing in T1, but he is just not playing in Brazil for the time being. And then we have W7M. They have a logo change as well as 2 player changes. So the roster now consists of Herds, GDN, Keys. I imagine that's how you say this. Keys, JV92, and Volps, with JV92 and Volps being the 2 new players. They got rid of Panico and Gui, or Guy, however you prefer to pronounce it. And then, all right, Furia, another one of the sort of top teams in LATAM, never the top, but they did qualify for several events, not doing spectacularly, but not having any super poor performances. They did it grouped in one of the majors, but nothing too extremely bad. It was a very tough group. So Miracle, Rare, and Fantasy remaining on the roster. They picked up Handy and STK, and they dropped Lenda and Highs. Okay, and then finally, OO Nation, Double O Nation, however you call it. They took over Santos' spot. So Santos remained in the league by winning their relegation game, but their spot was bought out by these guys. So Neskin, KDS, and Levy coming over from Team 1. So again, Lagonis remaining on Team 1, Alamau going over to G2 in Europe, and then the other 3 guys from Team 1 from that major winning roster coming over here, joining Sexy Cake and Live. So this is where Live came. He left Black Dragons, came over to this roster, and Sexy Cake used to play on Liquid for a while until him and Moringa got dropped, and well, still no sign of Moringa for the time being, but indeed Sexy Cake is back. So once again, Sexy Cake, Neskin, KDS, Live, and Levy make up this roster. A good looking roster, and it is always fun to see this sort of thing, like a core remaining together, but they're even going to a different team. I think their coach is also coming over from Team One, and then a couple of other really solid players. Sexy Cake returning to the league, and Live remaining in the league, coming over from another team. And yeah, so that pretty well does it for LATAM. That spoiler I was referring to earlier, W7M beat FaZe 7-3 on Bank, so they got to, or not Bank, on Border rather. So we got to see some Border, and we got to see FaZe, perhaps the favorites or one of the favorites going into this event. They were, of course, the highest placing LATAM team at SI. They got 3rd place. And I mean, the heavyweights, the favorites going into the season, I would have imagined them to be FaZe, Ninjas in Pajamas, and Liquid. And then maybe just a small tier below, like Furia, who were pretty solid and just made some seeming improvements. And then MIBR, maybe even competing up here because they were, what, the 2nd highest placing LATAM team. They sort of surprised at the Six Invitational, and they were always solid. They just had some issues over the course of the 2021 season, a lot of it having to do with a player being injured. And then, I mean, Black Dragons, perhaps Live for Nade is an improvement for the roster. We'll have to see. Team One is a pretty well rebuild, some up-and-coming players. We'll see how they perform. And Double O Nation, maybe the most exciting addition to the league. And then INTZ, I don't know, exists, I guess. They did make a change, so maybe they will be improving as well. Because, I mean, generally the teams that were going to the Copa Elite Six and going to the majors were FaZe, NiP, Liquid, Team One, and Furia, and MIBR did go to the Six Invitational and the Invitational before that. They just happened to not make it to either of the majors. So, all right, yeah, LATAM might be exciting going forward. I don't imagine I'll be watching it too much, considering there's not an official broadcast, but maybe I'll tune into some of those co-streamers and see what's popping in there and see if they are having a good time, and just to get some LATAM Siege. You know, it's different than NA or Europe or any of the other regions. Just because they didn't win the most recent SI doesn't mean they aren't one of the strongest regions. And, you know, considering how dominant they were over the course of the last year, it's entirely possible they're still overall the strongest region, but SI does raise a lot of questions in that regard, and we'll have to see how they fare at the upcoming major. Okay, yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one.